If you think the scariest thing about a beach house is the basement, you've never met what waits on the third floor. These aren't ghost stories. They're documented, verifiable nightmares, true horror stories pulled straight from the seemingly peaceful coasts of America, where sunlight hides secrets and vacation homes turn into hunting grounds. In this special episode of Verified Fears, we're diving into 3 chilling true encounters that begin where most people let their guard down on a quiet trip by the ocean. You're about to hear from 3 different people. None of them knew each other. None of them could have predicted what was coming. But each of them walked into a beach house and came face to face with something they were never meant to find. The first thought he was doing a simple favor for family. The second was just trying to enjoy a weekend with a friend. The third, she was hoping for a night of harmless stargazing with her girlfriends. None of them came out the same. Real intruders, real fear, real survival. And before you say that could never happen to me, just know every single one of them said the same thing. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and prepare yourself, because what hides behind closed doors in these stories isn't just creepy. It's calculated. Stay until the end. I promise you it only gets worse. I didn't realize I wasn't alone until the closet door started to open and I could hear someone breathing from the inside. This story happened just a few months ago, during what I can only describe as one of the most disorienting chapters of my life. I had just graduated college early, something I thought would feel like freedom, like a victory lap. But in reality, it felt more like I had accidentally stepped off a moving train. My job didn't start until June, and most of my friends were still deep in finals, meaning I was suddenly alone. I had all this time, no real responsibilities, no structure, no deadlines, just space. And space, as I found out, can be a very dangerous thing when your mind's used to chaos. At first I tried to treat it like a break. I slept and binged shows, scrolled endlessly, tried to convince myself that I deserved the rest. But by week 2, that sense of aimless freedom had rotted into something much darker. I felt useless, trapped in a holding pattern between who I was and who I was supposed to become. So when my mom asked if I could check on my Uncle Rick's beach house, I didn't hesitate. I said yes before she even finished the sentence. It felt like a mission, something productive. All I had to do was drive down to Rehoboth Beach, do a quick walkthrough of the property and make sure everything looked good after the winter. Nothing broken, no leaks, no signs of squatters or storm damage. Easy favor. But something in me already felt weird about it. Not fear exactly, just that sinking instinct you can't explain. And the truth is, I should have listened to that feeling. Because that house wasn't empty. Something else was already there, hiding, waiting, watching. The drive down wasn't bad. Just over 2 hours, mostly empty roads, late afternoon light cutting across the windshield like blades. I kept the windows cracked, music low, trying to hold on to that feeling that I was doing something useful. But as soon as I pulled into the driveway, something shifted. I can't explain it, just this weird low-frequency hum of discomfort that hit me the second I turned off the engine. The house was massive, familiar, and yet off. Like looking at a photograph of someone you love where the eyes feel just a little too empty. I'd spent every summer of my childhood in that place, sleeping on air mattresses, waking up to the smell of pancakes and sunscreen, 25 cousins and uncles and screaming toddlers packed in like a human circus. That house was alive back then. Now it felt like a body without a heartbeat. I stepped inside and the silence hit me like a wave. I mean complete silence, not just quiet, but that unnatural kind that feels like it's pressing in on your ears. No wind, no creaking, no hum of appliances, just stillness. I started running through Rick's checklist: turn on the water test, the faucets, check the breaker panel, walk the perimeter. Everything worked. Everything looked fine. But that didn't matter. The place felt wrong, like something had been waiting or watching. I caught myself looking over my shoulder more than once. Every corner of that house felt darker than it should have been, like the light just wasn't reaching the walls. And even though I was technically alone, I kept thinking I was going to turn a corner and see someone standing there. Not moving, not talking, just there. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was just the echo of too many memories bouncing around a house that used to be full of life. But deep down, I knew better. Some silences aren't just empty. They're loaded. And this silence. It felt like it was holding its breath. By the time I finished checking everything, the sun was already bleeding out over the dunes. That kind of soft orange that makes the world look warm, but feels cold as hell. I shot my mom a text saying I'd stay the night, told her I didn't want to drive back in the dark, which was true. What I didn't tell her was that the idea of walking back through that front door felt like stepping into someone else's nightmare. But I pushed the thought down. Made a quick meal, scrolled my phone, brushed my teeth, the usual. Normally during family trips I'd get shoved into one of the upstairs kid rooms. Lumpy mattress, no AC, broken ceiling fan humming like a dying bug. But that night I had the whole place to myself. So obviously I claimed the master bedroom on the second floor. Big bed. Private bathroom. Walk-in closet the size of my freshman dorm room. Luxury. I crawled into bed around midnight, exhausted but restless. That kind of tired where your body's down but your brain is sprinting laps. At some point I finally started to drift off until a sound snapped me wide awake. It wasn't loud, just wrong. Like something shifting weight behind a closed door. I froze. Every hair on my arm stood up at once. The sound had come from the closet. Not near it. Inside it. I stayed completely still, staring at that door, heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my teeth. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, old house noises, wood settling, maybe even my imagination playing games with me. But the problem was, I wasn't imagining it. Because just as I started to convince myself I was being dramatic, I heard it again. A low, muted thump. Like someone repositioning their foot. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just laid there paralyzed, not from fear, but from this deep primal understanding that something else was in the room with me. Not a ghost. Not a dream. Something real. Something breathing. I didn't know how long I laid there just staring at the closet door, like if I blinked I'd miss something. Or maybe something would notice I was watching. The air felt heavy, like the whole room was holding its breath. I wasn't paralyzed, not exactly. I could move if I wanted to. But I didn't. Because every instinct in my body was screaming the same thing. Don't move. A muscle. I shut my eyes. Tight. Told myself to go back to sleep. That I'd imagined it. That my brain was just messing with me because I'd been alone too long. And for a second, it almost worked. Almost. I was right on the edge of slipping back into unconsciousness when I heard it. A soft creak. My eyes shot open. The closet door was opening. No big dramatic slam, no jump scare. Just the slow, agonizing sound of a door being pushed open inch by inch. I barely opened my eyes just enough to see through my lashes, and that's when I saw him. A figure, standing, inside my room. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He didn't even breathe loud enough to hear. He just stood there, a silhouette in the dark, watching me like I was something he'd been waiting on for a long, long time. 20 seconds passed, maybe 30. It felt like a year. Every second stretched and warped like time itself didn't want to move forward. Then just as silently as he had appeared, he turned and walked out of the room. But he didn't go downstairs. He went up, to the third floor. And that's when my stomach flipped, because I remembered something awful. There's no way out up there, no exits, no balconies. No, just old guest rooms and one narrow staircase, the same one he had just walked up. So tell me if he didn't go back down. Where the hell was he going? I don't know how long I laid there after he disappeared upstairs. My body was frozen in place. Not from sleep paralysis, but from sheer absolute fear. The kind that doesn't just hit you in your chest, but buries itself deep in your spine, locking up everything. I wasn't just afraid of what I'd seen. I was afraid of what I hadn't yet seen, because somehow the silence that followed him was louder than his presence. And the only thing louder than that was the voice inside my head screaming at me to do something, anything, but how do you act rationally when your brain is already convinced you might die tonight? Eventually, somehow I snapped out of it, reached across the bed with trembling fingers, and grabbed my phone without turning on the light, my thumb shaking as I unlocked it and dialed 911, whispering as quietly as I could that someone was in the house. And when the dispatcher asked me to repeat myself, I remember thinking, if I say it out loud again, It becomes more real, but I said it anyway because I had no choice. I slipped out of bed and tiptoed to the door, locked it gently, praying it wouldn't click too loud, then sat there on the edge of the bed and the dark phone clutched to my chest, waiting, counting every heartbeat, like it might be my last. Until finally, red and blue lights painted the walls like war colors, and I nearly collapsed in relief when I saw the cops pull into the driveway. I flew down the stairs and met them at the door, stumbling over my words barely coherent, but they didn't wait. They stormed inside, like they were ready for anything, weapons drawn, and I stayed outside, staring at that house like it had betrayed me. Minutes passed, long and cruel, and when they came back down, they said the words I never wanted to hear. We didn't find anyone. And in that moment, something in me snapped because I knew what I saw. I knew where he went, and I knew he hadn't come back down. So if he wasn't there anymore, then where the hell did he go? I couldn't accept it. Not when the officers looked me dead in the eye and said the house was empty. Not when every bone in my body was still vibrating with fear. Not when I knew what I saw with my own eyes. Because the facts didn't add up. He went upstairs and no one ever came back down. And that staircase only goes one way. So unless he sprouted wings or phased through the walls, he had to still be in there somewhere. Hiding, waiting, breathing. And when I told them that, I could see the hesitation in their faces. That subtle shift that says this kid might just be freaking out. But then I called my uncle Richard Hale, the guy who owns this whole place. And the moment I told him what happened, he flipped, yelled through the phone, told the officers in no uncertain terms to search again, and not leave until they were absolutely sure I was safe. And for some reason they listened. This time, they moved slow and methodical like a SWAT team, clearing every inch, opening every closet, crawling under every bed, tapping on walls like they expected to find a false panel or some hidden crawl space. And I followed behind them because Rick told me to stay close and make sure nothing got missed. It wasn't until they reached the third floor that something finally clicked. One of the bedroom windows, the exact one in the room I was supposed to sleep in, was unlocked wide open like someone had left in a hurry or planned to slip out. And while one officer stayed by the door, the other headed downstairs, stepped out onto the back deck, and shined his flashlight up onto the roof. And that's when everything stopped. Because the beam caught something, a shape, a person just sitting there, perched like a gargoyle on the shingles, arms wrapped around his knees, staring straight ahead like he wasn't even in his body. The cop called it in, and in minutes, they had him in cuffs, dragging him down with practiced ease, and I just stood there watching this pale, bald man in tattered clothes get walked past me like a ghost who had finally been caught in the light. And what chilled me the most wasn't what he looked like. It was the look in his eyes, blank, glassy, like none of it mattered, like he had already moved on to the next house. Even after they took him away, after the flashing lights faded and the officers packed up their radios and wrote down my statement for the second time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. Like I was standing in the aftermath of something way bigger than me. Something I was only beginning to understand. The cops said he was probably homeless, maybe mentally ill, maybe just looking for shelter. And yeah, maybe that's true. But that doesn't explain how he got in without tripping the security latch Rick had installed. It doesn't explain why the window he used was the one in the exact room I always stayed in during family trips, like he knew my routine before I did. It doesn't explain why he chose the closet, why he stood over me without doing anything, why he left without taking a thing. I keep going back to that moment, 20 silent seconds of eye contact in the dark, and wondering, what was he thinking? Did he change his mind? Was he studying me? Was he planning something worse, but backed out when I didn't move? The truth is, I'll never know. And maybe that's the part that haunts me most, not what happened, but what almost did. I don't sleep the same anymore. I don't trust silence the way I used to. And every time I walk past a closet, I check it, even when I know it's empty. Because sometimes it's not about what you see, it's about what's already seen you. And the crazy thing is, I thought that would be the end of it. That once I left that house, I could move on. But a week later, a friend of mine, Mike, invited me down to his family's beach house on the Jersey Shore. I figured I needed a break, a reset, a way to clear my head. But what I didn't realize was that this time, the danger wasn't hiding inside the house. It was something way weirder. Something that made me question everything about what had just happened and whether we were ever really alone to begin with. If the first story made you afraid of closets, this one will make you fear your own pillow. After what happened at my Uncle Richard Hale's beach house, you'd think I'd stay far away from any place that involved creaky floors, silent rooms, or long stretches of empty shoreline. But trauma has a strange way of following you, not always directly, but in echoes. And sometimes those echoes find you when you're least prepared. A few weeks after my own nightmare, my buddy Michael Tanner invited me to spend the weekend at his family's place down by the Jersey Shore. On paper, it sounded like the exact reset I needed. A calm, no-pressure trip. Just two friends hanging out, maybe fishing, walking the boardwalk, sleeping in, and finally getting back to some sense of normalcy. But what we found instead was something that never should have been there. A device small and black tucked neatly under a pillow. It didn't belong to either of us. It had no label, no buttons, no screen, just a blinking red light and a switch. And the moment we realized it had been intentionally placed in that spot, everything shifted. It wasn't a malfunctioning smoke detector. It wasn't an old piece of equipment. It was a message. Someone had been in that house, maybe while we slept, maybe before we got there, and they wanted us to know. This story isn't fiction. It's not dramatized. It's not exaggerated for views. It's a true horror story, one that still haunts the both of us, not because of what we saw, but because of what we almost didn't. This is the kind of story that makes you triple-check every window lock, that makes you sleep with the lights on, that makes you stare into the shadows at 3 a.m. and wonder if you're really alone. Because sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones hiding in your closet. Sometimes they're the ones who already made themselves comfortable in your home, and they're just waiting for you to find the first clue. And in our case, that clue was a beeping box with no origin and no explanation. Just a red light. And the feeling that someone had been watching us long before we even arrived. It was sometime past midnight when I first heard the sound. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, one of those high-pitched digital beeps that your brain folds into a nightmare. But it didn't fade. It cut through the stillness like a blade. Shrill, sharp, unmistakably real. I sat upright in bed, adrenaline already spiking, heart pounding loud enough to drown out every rational thought. Michael's beach house wasn't massive, but it was old, the kind that creaked and shifted with the wind. Still, this wasn't some random house noise. This was deliberate, mechanical. A high-frequency beeping that repeated every 2 seconds with unnatural precision, like a countdown, or worse, a signal. At first I thought maybe it was a smoke detector, low battery maybe. But there was no smoke, no flickering light, and no smell. Just that awful noise tearing through the silence. I stepped out of the room barefoot, scanning the second floor, moving slowly to avoid waking Mike. The sound wasn't coming from the hallway or the stairs. It was above. I froze. There was only one place left, the third floor. My gut twisted. That floor had been dark and empty when we arrived, nothing but closed doors and a single hallway window. We hadn't even gone up there earlier. There was no reason to. But now it was the only source of the noise. I turned back, rushed to Mike's room, shook him awake with urgency in my voice. "Something's beeping upstairs," I whispered. No hesitation. He followed, barefoot and shirtless, still half asleep, but alert enough to feel that something was very, very wrong. We climbed the stairs together, hearts in our throats, the sound growing louder with each step. Beep. 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 The hallway upstairs was bathed in moonlight and everything looked normal. Too normal. No smoke, no signs of fire, no electronics plugged in. We followed the sound like a trail and ended up in one of the guest bedrooms. That's when I saw it. Tucked neatly under one of the pillows, like it had been placed there with intention, was a small black object. I picked it up slowly, confused. It was about the size of a walkie-talkie, completely matte black, no screen, no logo, no buttons, just a blinking red light at the top, and what looked like a single switch on the side. That's it. It didn't feel like any normal household device. It felt custom. It felt wrong. I flicked the switch off, and just like that the sound stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Mike walked in at that exact moment. He looked at the box in my hand, then at me. Neither of us said a word for a solid 10 seconds. It was like our brains couldn't compute what we were seeing. "You ever seen this before?" I finally asked. He shook his head, eyes wide. "No, never." And then we both realized the same terrifying thing at the exact same time. This wasn't left here by accident. Someone had been in the house. Someone had been upstairs. And someone wanted us to find it. ChatGPT said, at first we tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was left behind by a contractor. Maybe one of Mike's cousins had brought it there during a summer trip. Maybe it was nothing. But we both knew we were lying to ourselves. That thing hadn't been there earlier. We had walked through every floor when we arrived, unpacking our stuff, checking rooms, settling in. That pillow had been fluffed, that bed untouched. The box wasn't dusty. It wasn't misplaced. It was intentionally hidden. And the worst part, it had started beeping in the middle of the night, meaning someone somehow had triggered it. That's when a new thought hit us. The switch. The only way to activate the device was by hand. The moment that realization sunk in, the room felt colder. Not just chilly, unnaturally cold. The air turned heavy, like the silence was pressing down on our chests. Mike whispered, "Bro, we're not alone." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Every survival instinct in me was screaming now, not just whispering. This wasn't one of those horror stories you laugh off. This was happening. In real time. In real life. And just like that, the entire energy of the house changed. The wooden floors that once creaked with character now sounded like footsteps waiting to happen. The shadows that once looked cozy now felt like they were hiding something. Every open door became a threat. Every closed one a trap. We quickly double-checked all the rooms on the third floor. Nothing. No broken windows. No visible signs of forced entry. But then again, if someone had been here hiding, watching, would they really leave evidence? That thought alone made my blood run cold. We retreated to Mike's bedroom and locked the door behind us. He shoved a chair under the handle without saying a word. For a moment we just sat there staring at the box on the floor, like it might start beeping again. Like it might explode. Or worse, send a signal to someone nearby. That's when the fear shifted. It wasn't just the idea that someone had been in the house. It was the horrifying thought that they might still be here. We hadn't checked the crawl spaces. We hadn't checked the attic. We hadn't checked under the beds. And when you're dealing with someone willing to sneak into your beach house and plant a silent blinking device under your pillow, nothing feels off limits. That night we stopped thinking like guests. We started thinking like prey. Because suddenly the question wasn't, how did this thing get here? It was, how long has someone been watching us? Mike was the first to move. His hand reached for his phone like it was a lifeline, his fingers fumbling over the screen as he pulled up the keypad. "We're calling the cops," he said, voice low but firm, not panicked, but something worse, serious. That kind of serious that only shows up when two people realize they might be living the first act of a Dateline episode. I nodded silently, still staring at the door, half expecting it to creak open on its own. Mike pressed the call button, put it on speaker, and waited. Every second felt like glass shattering in slow motion. Then click. A voice on the other end, 911. "What's your emergency?" Mike kept it cool, but you could hear the tension in every word. "We're at a house down on Driftwater Lane by the beach. We just found a device under a pillow on the third floor. It wasn't ours. It started beeping out of nowhere. We think someone's been in the house. Or is still here." That last sentence hung in the air like poison. The dispatcher's tone changed instantly. "Stay where you are. Lock the doors. Officers are en route." Mike thanked her and hung up. Then we did what anyone would do in that moment. We barricaded. Fast. Chair under the knob. Dresser pushed halfway across the room. Lights off. Phones charged. Now it was just the waiting. And let me tell you, nothing messes with your mind quite like the waiting. You start hearing things. Breathing where there's no one. Footsteps that might be your own heartbeat. I could have sworn I saw movement outside the window even though we were on the second floor. Every creak of the house became a threat. Every second the cops didn't arrive felt like an hour stretching out into forever. I kept checking the clock, doing that anxious math. They should be here by now, right? It's a beach town. How far could they be? Then finally the flash. Red and blue lights strobing through the slats of the blinds like salvation. We heard car doors slam, radios crackle, and boots pounding up the front porch. Mike flung the bedroom door open as the first officer stepped inside. Relief hit me so hard I nearly fell over. But here's the thing, that relief didn't last. Because when we told them everything, when we showed them the device, when we led them up the stairs to the 3rd floor, they searched the entire house. And their verdict house is clear. No signs of forced entry. Nothing up there now. Mike and I looked at each other speechless. That's when I realized the real horror wasn't that someone had broken in. The real horror was that they might have never left. The officers didn't waste time. One went floor by floor, room by room, flashlight in hand, checking doors, windows, crawl spaces, even tapping on walls, like they expected to find a false panel or hidden compartment. The other asked us questions, basic stuff. How long had we been there? Did we lock all the doors? Had we noticed anything out of place when we arrived? But our answers weren't enough to explain what came next. We told them we hadn't even been up to the 3rd floor earlier, that we'd found the device under the pillow completely by chance, triggered only because it started beeping on its own. That was the spark. But the explosion that came when the officers walked back down, one of them with a look I'll never forget. He didn't say anything at first, just asked us calmly, "Are you absolutely sure no one's been up there tonight?" Mike and I nodded, confused. That's when they took us upstairs, and what we saw nearly dropped us to the floor. Every window on the 3rd floor was wide open. Every single one. The moonlight poured in, making the scene look almost staged, like a twisted display from a haunted house attraction. But this wasn't Halloween. This was real. Drawers were pulled completely out of dressers and dumped across the floor. Beds were flipped. Linens torn. Even the bathroom cabinets were left hanging open, like someone had been searching for something or hiding. That pristine, unused floor we remembered was now a war zone of disarray and broken calm. And the scariest part: when we first followed the beeping into that exact room, none of this had been like this. We stood there in disbelief, trying to make sense of it. Had someone been upstairs when we arrived? Had they hidden somewhere while we searched for the source of the noise? And then after we left, had they come out and done this? The idea made my stomach twist. One officer checked the closets while the other inspected the attic hatch. Nothing. No one. But someone had definitely been there. And they had moved fast. Too fast. The officer muttered something under his breath. I caught part of it. Doesn't feel right. That made 2 of us. This wasn't just a break-in. This wasn't just a prank. It felt orchestrated. Like we were being studied. Like we'd walked into someone else's plan without realizing we were playing the main characters. Whatever this was, it was bigger than some squatter or random vandal. Someone had been waiting in that house, watching us, maybe even from the start, and the device under the pillow. That wasn't the beginning. That was the warning shot. What haunted us the most wasn't what the cops found. It was what they didn't. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. No clear explanation for how every window on the 3rd floor ended up wide open, or how a strange blinking device made its way under a pillow we know was clean when we got there. It was like the intruder had evaporated, or worse, like they never had to enter in the first place. Mike and I didn't sleep that night. We sat on the living room couch, lights on, eyes locked on every shadow like it might blink back. The officers eventually left, but their parting advice stuck in my throat like a knife. Double-check your windows and call again if anything else happens. That was it. No reassurance, no explanation. Just the vague implication that whatever had invaded our space might still be watching. As the sky began to lighten, casting pale blue over the dunes outside, something settled in my chest, a realization that felt heavier than fear. This wasn't just about someone breaking in. It was about being chosen. Targeted. That device wasn't random. That ransacked 3rd floor wasn't random. Someone had been inside with us, maybe right beneath our feet, and we had no way of knowing for how long. That level of violation doesn't go away. It infects how you see every dark corner, every creak of a floorboard. It reprograms your trust in silence. Mike and I left as soon as the sun touched the roof. The air outside was fresh, bright, almost mocking. We didn't say much on the drive back. Just silence, processing, letting the paranoia bleed into the edges of our everyday thoughts. Because when something like that happens, you don't just move on, you start asking questions. Bigger ones. Like who else has experienced something like this, and why we never hear about it. That's when I got a call from my friend Emily Ross. We hadn't spoken in a while, but the moment I heard her voice, I knew something was wrong. Shaky low, like someone speaking through tears they didn't want me to hear. She said she'd just gotten back from a weekend at a beach house on a private stretch of coast with 3 of her closest friends, and something unthinkable had happened. She couldn't even say it over the phone. All she said was, it was supposed to be a girls' trip, but 2 of them didn't make it back the same. I didn't need any more convincing, because in that instant I realized whatever darkness we'd felt, it wasn't isolated, it was spreading. And Emily's story, it would make ours feel like a warm-up. I thought the worst thing that could happen at a beach house was a break-in, until my friends got abducted by strangers they met just hours earlier. That's what haunts me now. Not the fear, not even the flashbacks. It's the sickening realization that safety is an illusion and the nightmare doesn't always knock. Sometimes it smiles and says hi first. If you've ever felt like something was off but couldn't explain why, if you've ever walked away from a situation and later thought, God, if I'd stayed I might be dead, then you already know the weight of what I'm about to tell you. This isn't just a horror story. This is a cautionary tale that unfolded under string lights, ocean breeze, and false charm. And it all happened during what was supposed to be the most peaceful girls' weekend of our lives. We had just finished hearing about the police finding a man living on the roof of a beach house, hiding for days in total silence. That story messed me up. How could someone be that close and no one know? But at least that ended with cuffs and closure. I wish mine had. Because what happened to us didn't end when the cops showed up. It lingered. It fractured friendships. And it reminded me that evil doesn't always come masked in chaos. Sometimes it wears a hoodie and walks barefoot on the sand. I'm Emily Ross. I'm not a thrill seeker, not a party girl, not the type to chase danger. I've lived my life clean, disciplined routine, borderline boring. But when my friend Lindsay invited me and 2 of our college besties, Tia Morgan and Brianna Chase, to her family's private beach house for a weekend escape, I said yes. I trusted the location. I trusted them. I never imagined one night would end with sirens, duct tape, and a fight for survival. If you think nothing bad ever happens in neighborhoods like these, gated communities, million-dollar oceanfront homes, quiet streets far from chaos, let me break that illusion for you. Sometimes the most dangerous people don't break in. They're already inside. And what happened next? It still feels like a dream I can't wake up from. Stay with me because this story only gets darker. The first red flag didn't come waving. It came laughing. That kind of casual, echoing laughter that carries on the ocean wind and makes everything feel deceptively safe. It was close to midnight. We were sitting barefoot in the sand, our backs against the dunes, drinking White Claws, letting house music play low from Brianna's waterproof speaker. The moon was high, the waves gentle, the kind of night that tricks you into forgetting the world can be vicious. That's when we saw the flicker, just a tiny swing of light in the distance. A flashlight maybe, or a phone. Whatever it was getting closer. 3 figures walking in a loose formation, relaxed, unthreatening. At first. They looked like the kind of guys you'd see on a Hollister ad, sun-bleached hair, loose tank tops, confidence oozing in a way that wasn't aggressive, just disarming. When they got closer, one of them shouted a simple, "Hey," like we were old friends meeting again on some familiar shore. Thea shouted back naturally. She's the kind of girl who's never met a stranger, only future stories. The conversation was easy. Too easy. They said they were staying nearby, that they came down every summer, that they knew these beaches better than the lifeguards. And it didn't feel sketchy. It felt normal. That's what kills me. We were too comfortable too fast. They sat with us, cracked open their own beers, and just like that it became a beach hangout. No red flags, no weird energy. Just 7 people laughing in the dark. And while my instincts weren't exactly screaming, something inside me was watching. Noticing how one of them never took his eyes off Tia, how another seemed way too interested in Lindsay. But I brushed it off. We all did. Because this was supposed to be a memory, not a mistake. And when they invited us to come back to their place for more drinks, I hesitated. I don't know why I said no. Maybe it was fatigue, maybe it was luck. But the others, especially Tia, were already on their feet, giddy from the buzz and the company. I told them I was going to crash early. I said it with a smile, pretending nothing felt off. But something did. And I'd realized too late just how right that gut feeling had been. It should have just been a girls' night out. 4 best friends, 1 private beach, a few drinks, and no responsibilities. But in every horror story, there's a turning point, a moment when the group splits up and no one realizes it's the last time they'll all be safe. This was that moment. I told the girls I was calling it early. My head was foggy from the drinks, my feet were cold from the sand, and something about the guys, no matter how chill they seemed, just didn't sit right with me. I didn't want to be a buzzkill, so I laughed it off, gave them a lazy wave, and started walking back to the beach house alone. The last thing I heard was Thea giggling, her voice fading into the dark. "Don't do anything boring without us, Emily." That sentence haunts me now. The plan was innocent enough. Tia, Brianna, and Lindsay would go hang for another hour or 2, maybe flirt a little, drink a little more, and come home giggling like nothing ever happened. But this wasn't a movie, and those guys weren't just random beach flings. They had a plan, and we walked straight into it. Back at the house, I did the usual, kicked off my sandals, washed the sand off my legs, and crawled into bed. For a second, I considered texting the girls just a dumb "y'all good" message. But I didn't. I assumed everything was fine. I assumed nothing bad could happen on a beach like this, in a neighborhood like that, inside a house like hers. That's the trap. Safety isn't a place, it's a feeling. And that feeling can lie. What I didn't know at the time was that Lindsay had a moment of hesitation too. After they got to the guy's house, a place that looked more like a forgotten rental than a vacation home, she got uncomfortable. She said it smelled weird. The lights barely worked. And while Tia and Brianna were laughing, tipsy and carefree, Lindsay started to sober up fast. The guy who'd been chatting her up suddenly switched tones when she said she didn't want to stay. She said no. And just like that, he got angry. Not yelling, not screaming, just cold. Dismissive. "Get the hell out then." That's what he told her. Like she was disposable. And she listened. She left. She walked back alone. And for a few minutes, she thought that was the end of it. Until she realized she left her purse behind. That one mistake would lead her straight into the most terrifying sight of her life. Because what she saw next didn't belong in a beach town. It belonged in a nightmare. There's a reason people say your gut never lies. Lindsay's had been screaming at her from the moment she walked into that dimly lit house with flickering hallway bulbs and the kind of silence that feels too heavy for somewhere so close to the ocean. But she ignored it at first. She tried to be polite, tried not to kill the vibe. It wasn't until the guy she was with flipped from flirt to fury that her instincts kicked into full panic. She left in a rush, heart pounding, trying to laugh it off like it hadn't just gone from chill to chilling in seconds. She told herself she was overreacting. She just needed to breathe, to reset, to walk back to the beach house, crawl into bed, and call it a night. But halfway down the street, it hit her like a gut punch. Her purse. Her damn purse. Back inside that house with those guys, with her friends still inside. She turned around. No hesitation. And that's when everything shattered. She didn't even make it all the way back before she saw it, the SUV. Not parked, not idling, but pulling away from the curb fast like it was fleeing a crime scene. She didn't see the driver's face, but what she did see through the rear tinted glass made her knees buckle. It was Thea and Brianna. In the trunk. Hands tied. Duct tape over their mouths. The look in their eyes was pure terror, frozen like deer staring down an 18-wheeler. Lindsay didn't scream. She didn't freeze. She ran. Straight back to our beach house, her adrenaline going nuclear. She FaceTimed me first, because that was faster than calling 911 in her state of panic, and I'll never forget what I heard on the other end of that call. It was raw, primal, broken. "Emily. They took them. I saw them. They're in the trunk. You have to get the car. Get my dad's car. Now." I didn't ask questions. I didn't waste a second. I threw on whatever I could, grabbed her spare keys, and sped off into the night like my life depended on it. Because theirs actually did. The roads were empty. My thoughts were not. Every turn felt like I was chasing a ghost. until by some miracle I spotted that SUV. And as my hands gripped the wheel like a lifeline, I realized this wasn't just a rescue mission. This was the moment everything changed, the moment where our beach weekend turned from a memory into a nightmare that would follow us for the rest of our lives. The SUV was about 5 car lengths ahead, gliding too calmly down a quiet coastal road that had no business being part of a crime scene. My hands were trembling on the wheel, my vision tunnel-tight. I had one job: don't lose that car. That meant no distractions, no panic, and most importantly, no letting them know they were being followed. I called 911 with the calmest voice I could fake, relaying every street name, every landmark, every turn. The dispatcher told me to stay at a distance, keep my lights off, and wait for backup. But every second felt like a century. Every red light was a moral dilemma. Should I run it and risk crashing, or stop and risk losing them forever? By the time I saw the glow of red and blue in the rearview mirror, 2 cruisers rocketing past me like wolves chasing prey, I felt my entire body deflate. They caught up fast. One cruiser blocked the front of the SUV, the other flanked the side. No sirens, no warning, just precision. When they stopped the car, it was like something out of a movie. Guns drawn, shouts, adrenaline hitting the speed of sound. I pulled over and jumped out, barefoot, heart in my throat. I watched as the 3 men were yanked out of the vehicle like puppets being cut from their strings. One of them resisted, big mistake. He was tackled and cuffed so hard it echoed. I ran forward, screaming to the officers, "Check the trunk, my friends are in the trunk." And that's when they opened it. That moment, I'll never unsee it. The smell, the silence, the wide, terrified eyes of 2 girls who just had their humanity stripped away and shoved into the back of a car like they were luggage. Thea and Brianna were bound, bruised, trembling. But they were alive. And that was enough to break me completely. I dropped to my knees in the middle of the street. I don't know if I was crying or gasping for air or both. The cops handled it from there. The paramedics arrived fast. Thea and Brianna were taken to the hospital. The suspects were taken to jail. But the aftermath, that would take longer to treat. See, people think horror is a ghost in the closet or a shadow under the bed. But real horror is knowing the people you meet on a beach under moonlight might not just flirt with you, they might try to take you. And if Lindsay hadn't forgotten her purse, if I hadn't spotted that SUV, if the police had been a few minutes too late, this wouldn't be a story we're telling. It'd be a cold case buried in sand. There's a silence that follows trauma, and it's not the calm kind. It's loud in a different way. It's the silence of 3 girls sitting in a hospital hallway wrapped in blankets, eyes vacant, staring through the floor like they're trying to wake up from a nightmare they never signed up for. It's the silence that chokes a room when parents show up, and there aren't any words strong enough to hold back the flood of everything they're feeling: fear, rage, helpless, gratitude. Thea and Brianna didn't say much that night, and honestly, I don't think they could. The human mind has a way of shutting down to protect itself. In some ways, maybe it was a blessing they couldn't remember the worst parts. But Lindsay, she remembered everything, and she carried that guilt like a scar across her voice. She kept replaying it, how she let them walk into that house, how she didn't trust her gut sooner, how she almost left her purse behind for good. And me, I wasn't even the one in the trunk, but I still woke up for weeks afterward, drenched in sweat, heart pounding, hearing that FaceTime scream in my dreams. The guys those 3 monsters pretending to be harmless beach bros were locked up within the week. Turns out the house they'd been staying in wasn't even theirs. It belonged to an elderly couple vacationing in Greece. Breaking and entering, kidnapping, assault, possession of illegal substances, false imprisonment. You name it, the charges stacked like bricks in a prison wall they'll never climb over again. Thea's parents are both high-powered attorneys, and they didn't just demand justice, they hunted it down. But here's the real horror no sentence can erase. We almost became a headline. Another tragic disappearance brushed under the rug. Another beach memory twisted into a crime scene. And it was all so casual. That's what haunts me the most. The normalcy of it. Because when you watch true crime documentaries, when you hear about girls being snatched, it's always some far-off story. You never think it's going to be you on a weekend trip with your closest friends drinking canned cocktails under the stars. I stopped going to beaches for a long time after that. I couldn't handle the sound of the waves without feeling like they were hiding something. I ghosted my friends, even Lindsay, for months. Because healing didn't come with time, it came with distance. And every time I tried to talk about it, I'd just go numb. That's how I know this story matters. Not because it was dramatic, not because it was almost a tragedy, but because it was real and it could have been any one of us. Maybe the scariest part isn't what happened inside those beach houses. It's how easily it could have been you. No ghosts, no demons. Just real people with dark intentions slipping into the spaces we thought were safe. These weren't haunted homes. They were traps wrapped in luxury, and the victims, they were just regular people like you, like me, trying to unwind, to disconnect, to breathe. But here's the truth. No one likes to say out loud, horror doesn't knock. It waits. In closets. On rooftops. Behind friendly smiles on midnight beaches. And the moment you let your guard down, it steps in. If these stories made your heart race, or even just made you think twice before unlocking a beach house door, then mission accomplished. But don't keep this to yourself. Comment below. Which of the 3 stories hit you the hardest? Have you ever had an experience that felt just a little too off? Save this video because you never know when you'll need the reminder. And if you haven't yet subscribed to Verified Fears, we tell the stories others are too afraid to say out loud. And next time, the nightmare might be closer than you think. Stay paranoid. Stay alive.